When you arrive in a refugee camp, you arrive in these camps which are often in the middle of the desert, and they can be anywhere between 3,000 and 50, 60,000, or one I went to in Darfur had 130,000 odd. The children are so pleased, as it were, that someone is there. And so even though our main intent was to interview the adults, the women, the girls about rape as a weapon of war and the consequences they had suffered, we're always surrounded by these children who are just so interested that somebody is there and that wanted to engage. And I took every opportunity to play with them and then to sit with them and let them draw out whatever they wanted spontaneously and without instruction, whatever was inside their heads. And that's how the drawings came about as I was talking to their parents, their guardians, the teachers. They would draw for me these vivid scenes of violence and atrocities. What is interesting about the drawings is that they actually have 5 different dimensions, and children's drawings in war aren't new at all. They date back to the Spanish Civil War, but the first thing about these drawings is that they're very corroborative. So, for example, the drawing done of the helicopters hovering above a village with stick figures fleeing was done by a 13-year-old. And he said, "We ran outside when we heard the planes, not imagining about being bombed." They couldn't imagine that a civilian village would be targeted. And then he went on to describe how the bombs had fallen and how they had killed and injured many people. And at the same time, the ground forces rolled in, the government soldiers, the Janjaweed on horse and camel. Well, they're very corroborative and they're very illustrative of the testimony that Human Rights Watch and other agencies have taken of the attacks. The other thing that they do is they're very illustrative of the Janjaweed, which is the government-sponsored Arab militia, and they have been responsible for many of the attacks, and the government has armed them. And we have very few pictures of the Janjaweed. There's so little publicly available footage that these drawings become very important in informing us. And there is a very sophisticated drawing done by Abdul Rahman from West Darfur, and it shows the Janjaweed back-to-back on camels and on horses with a gunship hovering above and a rocket that's been dropped by the gunship at the bottom of the picture. And his story was that he was in the wadi, in the riverbed, when this happened, looking after his sheep, when suddenly the Janjaweed were coming very quickly on horses and camels with Kalashnikovs, shouting and shooting and yelling, "Kill the slaves, kill the blacks." And then he went on to describe how they had executed children and women and men and taken away girls and women. And then the planes had come and bombed the village and they'd taken the livestock and destroyed their food stocks. The other really compelling dimension of the drawings is that the children have done a lot of drawings of the arsenal of war. And by that I mean the Antonov planes, which drop the bombs, the MiG fighters, which are only weapons of war, the gunships, the tanks, and the armored personnel carriers. And these are owned by the government of Sudan. They have bought these weapons from China and from Russia. These are not owned by the Arab militia, which travels on horses and on camels and has some light armored vehicles.